Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be back with another young, smiling Indian, part of the Voice of the Young series. Right now, we have with us Nicky Yadav. Let's listen to her. Over to you, Nicky.
Right. Thank you, sir. Hello, everyone. Before I begin to reflect on my journey, I'd like to say thank you so much, sir, for inviting me on Vidped, and I'm more than honored to share a platform with you. In fact, I really admire this noble and novel concept of a participatory listener. So thank you. A quick intro about myself. I am Nicky Yadav. I was born and brought up in New Delhi and completed my schooling here itself. I had humanities with mathematics in plus two, and I've graduated this year with a bachelor's in economic honors from Shri Ram College of Commerce, Delhi University. And at present, I'm pursuing M.Sc Economics program at IIT Delhi. Now my journey has had its own share of highs and lows, which I'd love to talk about.
Sure.
Also, I'd be interested.
I said, sure, let's go ahead.
Right, sir. Also, I'd be interested to talk about building institutional resilience. I believe institutions has been a vital ingredient in success or failure stories of many economies, and thus fostering the strength of institutions should also be a core focus at present times. And I'd really hope the listener has something to take away from the choices I made and the discussion in general.
Okay, let's go.
Yes, right, sir. So I'd like to begin from ground level. So during my school, I was a kind of student for whom, for the longest time, good grades were my only source of validation, probably my only source of pride. And I used to fare pretty well in my academics, but there has always been a creative side of me. And so I participated in many co-curriculars like AdMaths, theater, paintings. And in sports too, I played chess mainly at the school and inter-school level. And fast forward to my 10th grade, I was the batch topper of my school. And during that same year, I had been nominated for a district level Dwarka Torchbearer Award for academic achievement by my school. And interestingly, on the ceremony day, for the first time in their 10-year history, the award was actually conferred to two individuals, and I was fortunately one of them. Now, even though in absolute marks, I ranked second in the shortlist, the thing that really worked out for me was my interview performance and co-curricular certificates in different fields that were hard to ignore, as the jury mentioned. So this experience really taught me that there should always be more to you than what meets the eye. Had it purely been on scores, I may have or have not won the award. But what you are really beyond the standard course book does matters. And yes, and then comes the time where you're supposed to choose your stream. So now I basically come from a conventional background in the sense that, like most of the other households, engineer or doctor are seen as typical career options. And my elder siblings are also in the medical profession. So choosing science for me was like more of a destined choice. And in that context, choosing humanities has to be one of the courageous decisions I took at that point. And yes. And so the next year was the pandemic year, and I'm privileged to say that the transition from offline to online classes was made smooth by the support of my school teachers and, of course, family, be it in terms of the resource constraints or the emotional support. And I think 2, 3 months before the 12th boards, I then started my research on the best economics college in India and their cutoffs. And looking at SRCC and St. Stephen's, my heart sunk for a moment, not to lie. I think not for a moment, but for a reasonable long time, because it almost demanded perfection. But yet, having the target at the back of my mind, I prepared for both, only to realize they were eventually cancelled. So even though I was the academic topper in 12th, but I knew for sure that those marks weren't sufficient enough to get into either of these two institutions. And as per the CBSE provision, then if you were unsatisfied by your marks, you could choose to write the paper again. And that's what I did. I actually wrote the paper in one of the subjects. And I remember that day of September vividly, in fact. It was raining heavily and the roads were flooded with no sight in vehicles. And the exam center was also quite a few kilometers away. I'm thankful to my sister for dropping me timely at the center because I had nearly missed it. And eventually I scored a perfect in that subject. And that is exactly how I secured admission at SRCC. Because in hindsight, had it not been for that paper I wrote, I wouldn't be at SRCC.
Okay.
So a key takeaway here would be that sometimes you ought to take the risk or calculated one to make things happen, because they don't always come to you knocking at your doorstep. And now moving ahead to a very crucial part of my journey, that is my life at SRCC. So I think the impact of SRCC is kind of intangible while you're at college, but when you step out of those four walls, you feel as a different person. And I mean this in terms of the interactions with other individuals or grabbing of campus internships, winning case comps, amongst many other things. And I'd like to touch upon the different aspects of my college life. The faculty was great, of course, and well-renowned, as they brought a great deal of wealth of knowledge and experience to the classroom. And I absolutely love the way how few of our professors deliver their subjects. For instance, in development eco, before even going into the chapter, we would randomly discuss about abstract terms and realized how everything is context specific in economics. To put up a simple example here, uh, right now the estimated fiscal deficit for India for the financial year 2024-25 is 4.9% of GDP, which is opposed to the ideal limit of 3%. So clearly it is bad only and only if we ignore the context of pandemic. So you really got to understand the context, because it's never like the case of one size fits all policy. There are institutions and the enforcement machinery which plays a great deal. And it was these discussions that I would always look forward to.
Yeah, go ahead.
And yes, sir. And even for international trade, one of my favorite subjects, beyond the standard models of comparative advantage, almost our every lecture would be preceded by a topical issue linked to international trade. Let's say why the gold prices are rising, or if the Chinese yen is a threat to dollar. And therefore, the kind of multidisciplinary knowledge that the professor had actually helped me in balancing the different perspectives rather than just viewing things as black and white. So really indebted to these professors for all that they've imparted. And coming to another issue that I'd like to address, it's one thing to enter in SRCC or say any IIT or IIM, and another thing to survive in a competitive environment. And clearly, SRCC is known for its demanding environment, and ideas like imposter syndrome are very much real. So right after we enter into college, there's a rigorous selection process spanning 2-3 rounds to enter into various clubs and societies. And there is a set hierarchy of the top tier 1 societies, the tier 2 societies. And if you don't make it to them, you're already viewed at a step below. And I think that's a fact. And one feels if you're doing enough or not at the expense of your studies. And this was me, and I've been at that stage. But I'm thankful to my mother actually, because she has been my constant full-time 24/7 therapist, who could actually give me just the right amount of encouragement and reality check that I needed actually. And in the same breath, I'd also like to highlight the importance of having a good friend circle around you. I was very fortunate to have one around me with whom I could connect on a deeper personal level. And the most amazing part is that these are individuals with strong opinions who stand true to their opinions and morals. And it's incredible when you have people with whom you can talk to about anything from academics or literature, or most importantly, your insecurities without being judged. Uh, and one more thing I'd like to stress upon here is that as many people say that one should try to network as much as possible. But here a caveat is that you should bear in mind the fact that networking is not the same as making friends. Of course, there are friendships that can sometimes lead to professional opportunities, and of course networking that can also develop into genuine friendships, but one shouldn't be that impressionable so as to not be able to discern the difference. So my 2 cents on that. And thankfully in my second year I was able to navigate through all of these complexities and complexions. I was able to figure out what really piqued my interest. And further here, something that constituted my maximum time in the first 2 years were internships and societies events and other competitions. And I would term this as my phase of self-exploration, because I just wanted to legit try on everything I laid my hands on. So as far as my societies experiences go, I led marketing society as a research director, where we would work on research and consulting projects with different companies, startups mainly. And we would also organize the annual fest that spanned mainly spanning the competitions and speaker sessions. I personally got a chance to interview Miss Navika Kumar, who happens to be the group editor of Times Network, and Mr. Madanlal Sharma, who was a part of the Cricket World Cup winning squad of India in 1983. And with respect to my internships, I've done a fairly reasonable amount. I think at FICCI, Invest India, Frost and Sullivan, and maybe some more. And I had great learnings from each of these places, either through the work or from the people with whom I worked with. And one of the experience that I really cherished was working at Nicole Associates. So it was an impactful project that was associated with the gendered impact of the pandemic. So I was supposed to collect primary data on this theme via interviews or surveys. And I personally conducted interviews with some women-led NGOs, women co-founded startups, ASHA workers who are basically community health workers. And we basically talked to them about their ideas on digital divide, which was sort of tangible, but it was made more conspicuous by the pandemic, and also their thoughts on unpaid work for women. So yeah, listening to these strong, resilient women was actually quite riveting for me. Their stories highlighted the government support disparities, the bureaucratic challenges, like some ASHA workers were paid timely, where some did not receive their payment on time. And also the sheer dedication of the frontline community health workers to always keep their professional commitment first. And then I also enjoyed the thought-provoking work at GTO. It's basically Global Trade Observer. I cannot divulge much, but I actually carried out research on how to quantifiably track the progress made on the free trade agreements and other preferential trade agreement in real time. Because usually FTAs are signed, but what's the actual progress done in terms of different variables, let's say the export-import quantities or measuring the digital trade or different mechanisms of dispute settlement, which is actually a different chapter in those FTAs. So basically, it was a multi-dimensional tracker, which is, I think, one of its own kind in India. It's still in the process, though. And finally, at Invest India, I had a very unique experience via working on this Solar X Startup Challenge, which is in collaboration with the International Solar Alliance, which is actually India's attempt to promote innovation in local solutions to the energy crisis in Africa, with the overarching objective of capacity building, basically. And this is actually the first edition of this challenge that is focused on the African continent, and it aims to roughly promote the solar energy ecosystem, which of course Africa is abundant in, and also foster a strong startup ecosystem. So all these winning startups that were operating in the solar energy sector, they were given cash grant and acceleration incubator support and opportunities of market access, investor connect, and mentorship connects. So yes, and the best part of these internships was, of course, learning from the people around me, from fellow interns and professionals who came from various backgrounds. So all in all, I loved embracing the diverse perspectives, and it was certainly a good way to learn about the intersection of qualitative, quantitative research, market studies, and of course, public policy. And now, segueing into the competitions. I think I've participated in the most random competitions because, as I mentioned, I wanted to experience everything. So these competitions had absolutely no interconnection to each other. So I participated in a monologue competition in IIT Roorkee, to a few writing competitions also, though I realized I'm not very good at that. And finally, to case competitions. I won in some, and in some I couldn't even qualify the first stage. But my most special memory in this regard has to be one of the case competitions that was organized by IIT Guwahati, wherein our team of three made it to the final, and the last round was offline, which was held in IIT Guwahati campus only. And finally, I think starting right from 8 p.m. that night to 6 a.m. the next morning, we managed to complete the case study. So in my life, basically, I'm a morning person, so I've never pulled off an all-nighter like this ever in my life. Though eventually we ranked fourth in the competition, but it was great to learn from the proposed solutions of the corporate professionals or the MBA candidates. And I think my key takeaways from my entire internships and societies experiences is that we shouldn't really self-doubt our capabilities or deciding what we are suited for without actually stepping into the shoe, because this is something that I closely resonate with. It might be desirable to make decisions vicariously living through other choices or experience, but that is not the answer always. Because me myself, having almost an entire dose of all the diverse routes, a shot at the corporate world and the research work, I eventually realized that pursuing economics further is my calling. And that's in my third year, I was entirely caught up in the entrance preparation. I gave CUET, which is like the common entrance tests for all the central universities. BSc is also under CUET apparently now. And I also appeared for IIT Jam. And finally, I opted for IIT Delhi, and here I am. So, yeah. Sir, I think you know.
Yeah, I'm on mute, right? Okay, so thank you, Nikki. That's a great journey, and you have really explained it so clearly and so well. It's really great to hear young people talk so clearly and succinctly, very summary, very clear. Great. Let me ask you a question which you may decline to answer. You mentioned that your dream was Stephens and SRCC. Why not Miranda House and LSR?
Um, Sir, actually, as far as the academic rigor is considered, my first choice was St. Stephen's, but I couldn't make it to the cutoff. And SRCC, of course, I actually went through the faculty. So I found most of the research papers, in fact, that is a part of DU readings, are actually authored by professors working at SRCC. And of course, since I was very unsure about my stint at the corporate world, so I wanted to experience that rigor. And I'm actually in hindsight, now I think choosing SRCC was the best decision, because in IIT Delhi also you experience the same demanding environment. And I think I'm not very sure if the other DU colleges sort of offer that kind of unique blend of academic research rigor alongside a very corporate rigor. So I think
Okay,
that's why.
okay, all right. Yeah, I've heard LSR women say this was the best thing that happened to me. So I just thought I'll ask. Okay, but it's nothing, everybody has to choose. So what's
Right.
your dream, so to speak? I mean, you were dreaming of these two colleges, you got in, now you're in IIT. What's next?
So I think I'm still in the decision phase. Though I'm sure I want to leverage my domain knowledge and skills in economics field itself, but I'm not really sure about the route, like via a PhD or via the public policy making sector. That is something that I'm still confused over.
Okay, all right. It's a good time to be confused because it's too early to know what you want to do, and people change all the time. There's one of the persons I talked to today. He shifted to machine learning. Now he's at the age of 27. So people change all the time, so it's nothing unusual. In today's India, there are too many choices and too many options, and people change all the time. I think it's the right way, because once your options, you are an economist, once your option set changes, your optimal point on that option set should also change. So
Right, sir.
because you are only optimizing with respect to your option and constraints, right? But if your option set changes, then the old optimum is no longer valid, right? You can
Right,
change
sir.
to something else. Okay. All right. So what tips do you have for young people?
So I think firstly would be that please do not ever self-doubt yourself. I think that is one of the worst things that you can do to yourself. Don't be afraid of any failure or rejections, because everybody makes mistakes, and setbacks are a normal part of learning and growing. And secondly, I actually gave a lot of thought on this, because it is a little contrary to popular perception of being perfect at everything. So, my advice is that whatever you choose to do, don't bury yourself under the pressure of pursuing it to the highest degree. As in, it's okay to paint or play guitar without having to be the best selling artist or the greatest guitarist. What really matters is you giving your 100% to to the activity or the path that you have consciously chosen.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Okay.
these were my two
All
big
right.
tips.
You did tell us about your internships and all at SRCC. But is there any one thing that sticks in your mind that, look, this was great?
So I think there was always an element of creating real world impact in most of my internships. But I think since I am sensitive to some of the gender issues, I really liked the approach to the research paper that was carried out by Nigor Associates. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that stood out for me. But
Okay.
I mean, nonetheless, the other internships were also great.
Okay. All right. Anything else you want to add here?
Yes, sir. I actually wanted to talk a bit about strengthening the institutions,
Yeah, by
actually.
the way, that's a very good topic. And I know you mentioned it at the beginning, and I was going to ask you to talk about it. So please do talk about it.
Sure, sir. Thank you. So actually in my third year, even though I couldn't choose political economy as one of my electives, there was a theme within political economy regarding the rules of game that focused on formal and informal institutions affecting economic behavior, which actually fascinated me. And it dawned on me that it's not always how economically prudent a policy is, but rather the institutions and political structures that influence the end outcome. There are these invisible institutions like the cultural norms or the social trust. And these invisible hands do significantly influence economic behavior. And to quote an example here, as a part of our DU reading, I read a chapter in Fault Lines by Dr. Raghuram Rajan, where he said that usually the developed countries' financial systems are characterized by transparency and a strong legal and regulatory framework. And opposite is observed in the developing countries on a general level. However, in the 2008 global financial crisis, something very different was seen. The developed financial systems looked more like the developing ones, as they lacked the kind of transparency and regulatory framework that they were characterized with. In fact, individuals very well acted rationally in response to the incentives that were produced by these institutions, like the loose monetary policy. And to quote another example, we have different models for growth and prosperity that shows different results in different contexts.
Mm,
If I am to compare East Asia and Latin America, I think in somewhere around 1960s, Latin America's per capita income was more than double of East Asia, but today it lags behind. And many of the East Asian countries
mm,
like South Korea, Taiwan,
mm,
they're almost developed nations. And I think, of course, the import-based industrialization strategy by Latin America and the export promotion strategy of East Asia was one factor. But to me, one of the defining factor was the stability of their financial institutions. The Asian countries more or less had a stable macroeconomic environment during this time in terms of smaller fiscal deficit, low and stable
mm,
inflation rates,
mm,
and under control exchange rates. While in the same time frame, if we see Latin America, they faced high fiscal deficit, high inflation, and overvalued exchange rates, which was coming in from the Washington Consensus that era. So, and I think, of course, one reason behind this is the non-autonomous central banks in Latin America in terms of their close nexus with the political leadership. And
mm,
also, much of Latin America hasn't really been able to diversify out of the commodity markets.
mm.
And therefore, in that regard, having autonomous central banks who can cushion the effects of the boom and bust cycle of these commodities becomes crucial for a stable macroeconomic environment. So, as far as my understanding goes, building the institution's resilience should also be a priority area alongside having welcome announcements on big physical, digital, and social infrastructure projects. Basically, good governance should be a top priority. And another thing is that institutions also needs to be updated or made relevant with evolving time. For instance, in the education sector, we see sporadic institutions like IITs, IIMs amidst the sea of mediocre or let's say below average institutions. So not just there's a need to create and build more such sustainable systems, but also strive for greater sustainability of these existing institutions, let's say DSC or IITs or IIMs or ISI. And I think that comes with better adoption of technology, of course, to enhance classroom teaching, mechanisms to foster curiosity, or to put in crude terms, to simply make us think. Because I've seen this on a personal level, that both the intent to deliver on the part of teachers and the intent to learn on the part of students has degraded, which is being reinforced by the incentives produced by these institutions. Let's say no performance monitoring or very business as usual approach to performance monitoring. There's a skewed student teacher ratio, which leads to callous attitudes. And uh, in my college, let's say the external factors like job placements and the perception that curriculum isn't really aligned to employability also have made the institutions weak. So in my opinion, focusing upon strong institution is as much important as forming the policies, because both are complementary to each other, and results will come around only when both go hand in hand. Yeah.
Right. You have spoken my heart. This is absolutely, I am in 100% agreement with you, and very few people understand this. Okay. But a little bit of nuance you need in your presentation between, okay, if you read my book on India 2047, which I wrote 3 years ago, chapter 2 is about this. And it makes it very clear that you cannot have economic policies without, and I call those things as meta-economic factors. Meta means beyond economics. They are meta-economic. Economic policy alone is not good enough. You need meta-economic factors to look at the meta-economic factors. So if you can, but little bit of clarity, meta-economic factors are not economic. What you are also adding in that is macroeconomic stability, which is not an institution as such, but it is a policy that you rightly said the Latin American countries could not have. So that's economic policy, to be macroeconomic stability. I mean, the worst example in our neighborhood is Pakistan. They have zero macroeconomic stability. We also didn't have till we hit bottom in 1991. And since then, we have had fairly decent macroeconomic stability. But that's not the same as an institution. Now, you may say that having a strong RBI is the meta-economic institution. Okay, so strong RBI, independent RBI, which doesn't just do what the government wants, but has its. So the institution is not the macroeconomic stability, but the strong RBI. Okay, strong and independent RBI, that's the institution. That's giving the power to the Fed or giving the power to RBI. That's a meta-economic institution. And then they can put a strong macroeconomic stability. Okay, I mean, Pakistan has taken, I contrast with Pakistan because it has taken, Argentina and Pakistan are in the gold medal race for who can take more IMF loans. Okay, I'm not sure who's ahead, 21, 22, 23, who's counting, right? But India has not taken since 1991, and Bangladesh also has taken some, but they are not of the crisis type. Whereas Pakistan and Argentina, you mentioned Latin America, they are taking crisis IMF loans. They run out of dollars. Okay. So you should differentiate between what I called in that book as the meta-economic factors, which are not economic, and then macroeconomic stability, which is what you have said many times, that you need this macroeconomic stability to promote investment. Because once you don't have macroeconomic stability, then people don't want to risk their money in investment. Because investment is essentially long-term. Why would you put your money in a long-term thing when you are not sure what's going to happen in the country, whether it's going to go through a crisis or something else is going to happen? So I think you are on to something very, very powerful and strong. I've not heard it from most young people. In fact, you don't hear it much from even senior people. You do hear it from people like Raghuram Rajan and some professors at Harvard and so on, that look, we need to focus on, when you say institutions, people actually get a bit confused. Do you mean to say SEBI, or do you mean to say, but that's what I coined the term meta-economic factors. Those which are not economic, beyond economics, let us say, but which impact economics. And then there is the economic policies framework, which rules everything. So among that economic policy framework, as you said, the rules of the game. The rules of the game are set by RBI and many, but overall, what happened in 1991 in India was that the rules of the game changed. What we call as reforms and so on, but ultimately what it meant was that the rules of the game changed. And one of the big changes which many people are not aware of is that the chief ministers got their power. And that now you can see the chief minister of each state saying, I will do what I want in my state and I will get it ahead, if they want to. It led to the rise of Gujarat as a state under Mr. Modi, because in the old framework, no chief minister had that power to pull her or his state like that. And it has led so that the rules of the game changed in 1991. And now you see different states doing different things. And getting the difference between the states is increasing because of the differences in the approach of the chief ministers. So that rules of the game, those are economic rules. Because the Planning Commission used to control everything.
Right, sir.
And then there are the meta-economic factors like, okay, is the Supreme Court independent? Can I get a judgment if there is a commercial dispute, or the government takes my land, or somebody else does? Can I get justice? Commercial disputes, because they are bound to be commercial disputes. So I'm a foreign investor. Am I going to get a hearing in India from the Supreme Court if the government, and in fact, sometimes people say the Supreme Court has ruled for the government just out of the fact that we are Indians. But if you are a foreigner, you think, okay, I have to operate according to Indian rules, which means Indian commercial rules. Are they suddenly going to put a big tax on me by changing the law? And if they change the law, does it apply to me? Can I go to the Supreme Court, or can I get a hearing at the Supreme Court, and does it give a decision? So these are the meta-economic factors. So sorry to give this lecture, but it's a lecture that I'm trying to give.
But I'm actually more than honored to, because these are the nitty-gritties and nuances. I mean,
they're not the
I
nuances,
love
actually, they are the big things that people neglect.
that's true, yeah.
They're not nuances. These are the big things that you have to have the meta-economic. I mean, we gave one person, one vote in 1950. Okay, that's a big difference. What it did was it eliminated famines in India. Before that, India used to have famines. Our agricultural production did not suddenly rise in 1950. Okay, it didn't. But no elected government with one person, one vote could afford to tell the people, okay, you are in famine, so suffer. Okay. You have to make sure that people don't suffer because they aren't going to vote for you. It's one person, one vote. So even if they're poor, even if they're there, there's been, and Amartya Sen has a long thing on it that, that famines ended, that institution of one person, one vote, that meta-economic factor, ended famines in India. Agricultural production actually didn't increase till late 1960s. And our population increased, right? Much faster than agricultural production. But no famines. Why? Because you put one person, one vote, and you held proper and fair elections. So that the one person, one vote, those people who were disadvantaged could vote. And their vote was, give me food. Right? So those are the meta-economic factors. And just anyway, my book is available on Amazon. You can take a look at it.
Sure, sir. Yeah.
It's chapter 2, it's so important for me to get those things right that I put them in chapter 2. I said, before you read anything about economics, please read this. So I'm so happy that I heard it from you. I was just waiting to talk about it. Okay, that's great. So please read it, do whatever you like with it, and use it to actually clarify your thinking between what can be called as meta-economic factors, stable macroeconomic policy, and at least those two. Macroeconomic stability, which is an economic policy, and meta-economic factors, which are not economic, but which sit above economic policy. Right? So those two, I think you have hinted at it very, not hinted, you have said it very clearly that you need both. You need, because the strong, correct meta-economic factors actually give you macroeconomic stability. Right.
Yes, sir.
So good. Thank you so much for giving me a chance. I don't like to talk in Vidpeds, but this was just, you sparked that thought process. Okay, wonderful, Nicky. Anything else that you want to say?
No, so I think that's pretty much it.
Okay.
I think I'm very privileged to hear it from you about all of this, and I'm very fortunate to know about the book as well. And I'll surely give it a read. Something of my interest very
Okay,
much.
let me know what you think of it. It's available on Amazon, surely, and Flipkart also, I think. But anyway, it's available. It's print and ebook. I am now in the process of actually revising it because what it didn't have is the goals. It talked more about methods rather than goals. And then last year, I wrote what I called as non-official development goals for India 2047. That's only in PowerPoint and all. There are 3 goals and 10 sub-goals. Okay, so that, because we don't have any goals for 2047, we just talk in very vague terms. But I'm not very, very specific in quantitative, but a qualitative, we must have some goals, especially for the young people. We must have some goals that look, and then I'm hoping to say that look, and maybe not just 10 sub-goals, maybe 25 sub-goals. Then we can say that look, what has to be done to achieve this sub-goal, right? And then what is actually being done to achieve it. So then we have a way of saying, look, and then there is also a possibility of trade-off between the goals. So this is so I'm going to revise it, but in the meantime, since you focused on, I don't talk about it much because I'm going to revise it, but I think chapter 2 on the meta-economic institution stands. And that term is there, meta-economic, because there's actually no term in the literature. Because we keep talking about institutions, and sometimes people say, I'm talking of institutions with a capital I, not with a lowercase I. But that is kind of not very illuminating. What is institution with a capital I? No one knows, right? So,
Yeah.
and then the meta-economic, of course, includes things I didn't, which are, like trust in government, the social capital, as you said, right? So anyway, think about those things and let me know what you think. And let's end it here today. Okay. All right. Anything else you want to add?
Not really. So I think I didn't get a chance to say it, but I'd like to acknowledge the support and guidance of my teachers and few of my close friends, siblings, and my professors for all their support and guidance throughout. That's all.
Okay. All right. That's great. I know it's always good to know who brought you where you are because you didn't do it alone. Okay. Most
Sure.
of us don't do it alone. We have a ecosystem that has brought us where we are. Okay. All right. Let's end it here. Thank you so much. Bye.